Hi, this is Mr. Bledsoe, and in this video we're going to look at a visual model for dividing whole numbers by fractions. In other words, our dividend is a whole number, like say 4. And our divisor is a fraction, like 2/3. And we're going to again think about division as repeated subtraction, just like we did when both our dividend and divisor were whole numbers. So let's take a look at this division problem. 4 divided by 2/3. My dividend is a whole number. My divisor is a fraction. And let's ask the same question that we asked in earlier division problems. How many times do I have to subtract 2/3 from 4 before I get down to 0? So I'm going to start by drawing 4 blocks to represent the dividend of 4. And notice that each of my 4 blocks is made up of 3 small blocks. And the reason I'm drawing my 4 blocks this way is because I'm going to be dividing 4 by 2/3, which means I'm going to be subtracting some number of 2/3 from 4. So it's going to be useful to be able to break up my 4s into thirds. Okay, so this represents, my 4 blocks here represents 4 divided by 2/3, and my 2/3 in this case is going to be represented by these 2 boxes here. So each of these large blocks represents 1 or 1 whole. So 1 whole. That's 1 whole. And each of these small blocks represents 1/3. So that box is 1/3, that box is 1/3, and so on. And now if I want to do repeated subtraction for this division problem, then I'm just going to count how many times I have to subtract 2/3 from 4 before I get down to 0. So here's 2/3 right here. I can subtract that out. That's 1. Here's 2/3. Subtract that out, that's 2. Here's another set of 2/3, 3, 4, 5, and 6. So I'm down to 0, therefore 4 divided by 2/3 equals 6, because I can subtract 2/3 from 4 6 times to get to 0. So I have my answer. And if I want to check my answer, remember that if 4 divided by 2/3 equals 6, then 6 times 2/3 must be equal to 4. Well, let's try it and see if it is. So 6 times 2/3, and we often will write this as 6/1 times 2/3. I'll multiply my numerators. 6 times 2 is 12. Multiply my denominators. 1 times 3 is 3. And 12 divided by 3 is 4. So yes, my division is correct. 4 divided by 2/3 equals 6. So we just used this visual model with blocks to model division of a whole number by a fraction, and I can imagine some of you thinking to yourselves, well, that's fine, but what if after we do our repeated subtractions, we have some blocks left over? Or in other words, what if there's a remainder and we can't get all the way down to 0? So let's take a look at a problem like that. So let's do this division problem. Let's do 3 divided by 2/3. And again, we're going to set it up the same way we did in the previous problem. So I need 3 blocks to represent my 3 whole numbers. And again, I've set up my 3 wholes so that they're easily divisible into 3 boxes. So this represents 3 divided by, and again, my 2/3 are these 2 blocks right here. So once again, I'm just going to start subtracting 2/3 from my 3 wholes and try to get down to 0. So here's 2/3. I can subtract that out once. Subtract again, there's 2. Subtract again, there's 3. Subtract again, there's 4. And I can see now I have one box left over. So it looks like 3 divided by 2/3 is going to be 4 and something. So it's very tempting to say, well, I can't subtract out another 2/3, but I could subtract out this 1/3. This one box right here I have represents 1/3, so that must mean my answer is 4 and 1/3, right? But it's not 4 and 1/3. That's incorrect. And the reason it's incorrect is that while it's true that I want to subtract out this final 1/3 so that I can get down to 0, I have to express this 1/3 as a part of my divisor. This 1/3 is a part of my divisor. Remember, my divisor is 2/3. So I'm trying to answer the question, how many 2/3 can I subtract from 4? So what part of my divisor, 2/3, do I have left to subtract out? Well, I have 1/3 that I want to subtract out. What part of 2/3 is 1/3? Well, this is my 2/3 right here, my 2 blue blocks. I want to subtract out one of them. What part of these 2 blue blocks is this 1 block? Well, 1 part out of 2 is 1/2. So to subtract this last part out, I'm going to subtract out 1/2 of my divisor. So my final answer is 3 divided by 2/3 equals 4 and 1/2. And again, I can check my work and make sure I got the correct answer. Let's do that. If 3 divided by 2/3 equals 4.5, then 4.5 times 2/3 must be equal to 3. So let's see if it is. 4.5 times 2/3 equals, so let me write 4.5 as an improper fraction. So 2 times 4 is 8, plus 1 is 9. So that's 9/2 times 2/3. And if I multiply my numerators, 9 times 2 is 18. Multiply my denominators, 2 times 3 is 6. And 18 divided by 6 is 3. So my division is correct. Okay, let's try one more example problem. Let's try 3 divided by 4/5. And I want you to try this one on your own first. So pause the video here, do this division problem using your grid paper and repeated subtraction, and then restart the video and see if you get the same answer that I get. Okay, so 3 divided by 4/5, I'm going to need 3 blocks to represent my 3 holes, but notice I want to be able to divide my boxes into fifths. So let's write it like, let's draw our boxes like this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All right, so I need 3 of these blocks that I can divide up into fifths. Okay, so there's my 3 divided by 4/5. And now my 4/5 are represented here by these 4 boxes here. Okay, so I want to start subtracting out 4/5 from my 3 holes. So let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4. So here's 1 4/5 that I can subtract out. 1, 2, 3, 4. Here's a second 4/5 that I can subtract out. 1, 2, 3, 4. Here's a third 4/5 that I can subtract out. And now I've gotten down to, I only have 3 boxes left, so I can't subtract out another full 4/5. So I can tell my answer is going to be 3 and something. Well, 3 and what? Again, I'm tempted to say that my answer is going to be 3 and 3/5. since these three blocks represent 3/5, but I know that's not correct because I have to express this 3/5, remember, as a part of my divisor, which is 4/5. Okay, so my divisor is 4/5, that's these 4 blue blocks, and I want to subtract out 3 of them. So what part of my divisor, remember this is my divisor, what part of my divisor is this group of 3 blocks? Well, 3 parts out of 4 is 3/4. So my answer is 3 divided by 4/5 is 3 and 3/4. And again, I can always check my answer using multiplication. If 3 divided by 4/5 equals 3 and 3/4, then 3 and 3/4 times 4/5 must be equal to 3. Well, let's see if it is. 3 and 3/4 times 4/5. I want to rewrite 3 and 3/4 as an improper fraction, so 4 times 3 is 12, plus 3 is 15/4 times 4/5. And let's see, 4 times 15 gives me, 1530 gives me 60. 4 times 5 is 20, and 60 divided by 20 is 3. So I've done my division correctly.